There reportedly could be a new migrant caravan in the works. An activist says a group of Haitians will leave southern Mexico for the U.S. in a few days. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
Haitian migrants in southern Mexico are reportedly considering a caravan north. Mexican authorities are trying to keep them in the city of Tapachula near Guatemala.
If there's going to be this trek towards the United States, that if it's to be repressed, then let human rights be respected. If they are going to stop the caravan, migrants say they will find a way to go because we're not going to stop.
Hundreds of migrants are registering for refugee status so they can stay. Local reports say about 90,000 migrants are in Tapachula alone. And U.S. climate envoy John Kerry traveled to southern Mexico Monday ahead of a UN climate conference. He said Mexico's manufacturing sector stands to benefit from a U.S. transition away from fossil fuels.
For example, when we switch from gasoline to electrified vehicles, there are going to be a lot of good-paying jobs here in Mexico.
Mexico's president talked about his Sowing Life tree plantation program. He says it employs 80,000 farmers, and it could be expanded to nearby countries as a way to deal with migration coming from Central America. And back to the United States, the White House says President Biden will meet separately Tuesday with moderate and progressive Democrats to discuss the spending bills.
The president is certainly feeling an urgency to move things forward, to get things done.
Moderates and progressives at odds over the size and scope of a $3.5 trillion bill focused on social spending and climate change. Biden conceding it'll have to be pared down. But the White House says climate aspects will remain part of the legislative push.
It is absolutely pivotal that these pieces of legislation have climate components, and they will, to address the climate crisis.
The press secretary also said the U.S. continues to press OPEC members on the oil supply issue as Americans grapple with rising fuel prices. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
Desperation boiling over in southern Mexico. Violent clashes between Mexican officers and migrants who have been held at the Mexico-Guatemala border. Many of them have been waiting there for weeks, even months, but now preparing to once again continue their journey north. The Mexican government saying those who attempt to leave the city will be met with legal punishments, some migrants taking that as a threat.
Estamos acá como presos, no podemos hacer nada, no podemos trabajar, y si trabajamos, pues nos pagan poquito.
The clash is foreshadowing further tensions across Latin America as tens of thousands are on their journey north. In Mexico, officials have reported over 140,000 migrants in the country in the first 8 months of 2021. That's 3 times the number seen last year. Over the weekend, migrants from countries all across Latin America held a vigil in Tapachula, Mexico. There are thousands there praying for a safe journey as they prepare to join the next caravan set to leave on October 23rd. Selena is a Honduran migrant. She has faith that she will make it to the United States.
Si nosotros le pedimos a Dios con fe, Él da respuesta, ya que estamos en las manos de Dios y dice su palabra que todo lo que pidamos en su nombre, creyéndolo recibiremos.
But they're not just looking for divine intervention. They're also trying the Mexican legal system. Almost 2,000 migrants asked for social aid in Mexico so they wouldn't be detained or deported. The organization Pueblos Sin Fronteras says the caravan will be massive.
Tenemos más de 2,000 personas que han aplicado, que quieren ser parte de este contingente, que quieren salir de la ciudad. Y si hay 2,000, quiere decir que tenemos 6,000 personas.
But the Biden administration does not want to be caught off guard. NBC News obtained government plans to build an intelligence cell that would monitor and predict migrant movements towards the U.S., just like the nearly 30,000 that arrived in Del Rio, Texas last month. One of the main tasks is to focus on misinformation and social media that is pushing many to take the dangerous journey. A senior DHS official telling NBC that once they arrive in Mexico, it's too late to intervene. But for those who are already in Mexico, they're getting desperate.
Yo quiero irme como sea, aunque inmigración me agarra, aunque yo no sé, yo voy a ir como sea.
Despite the dangers, many still risking it all to reach their final destination, the United States.
Julia joins us now from Washington. And Julia, you mentioned the Biden administration is targeting social media disinformation. What kind of messages are we talking about here? And a lot of times you were telling me this comes from the smugglers directly.
That's right. They're trying to make a profit here by advertising, sometimes on Facebook, other times on WhatsApp or other social media platforms, where they tell would-be immigrants, now is the time to come. Come today. Come during this week. This is the time. If you come to the United States, you'll be able to stay. If you come after that, you won't. It incentivizes migrants to make a very quick decision, spend a lot of money, and oftentimes, Tom, they're met with quick deportation or expulsion because simply the messages that these cartels and smugglers are spreading about the Biden administration's policies are not correct.
And Julie, do we know what exactly the Biden administration can do to sort of combat that misinformation on places like Facebook and WhatsApp?
Well, they're trying to run their own media campaigns in those countries, whether those be on billboards or radio stations, also just going straight to the source, trying to get their own information out on Facebook. They are actually bringing analysts into an intelligence gathering cell now who can build algorithms to look at the most popular, fastest spreading disinformation campaigns so that they can get to those the fastest and keep immigrants from leaving their home countries or the countries where they are now before it's too late.
She goes, you know, there's over 100,000 migrants coming through Panama on their way to the United States as we speak. And we start talking about that. But I asked her one specific question. Have you caught anybody on the terrorist watch list? And she goes, funny you asked that, Tony, because in Panama, we do biometrics. And we have apprehended 52 people that have been that are associated with Al-Qaeda.
She went on to tell the congressman that the Biden administration is absent. Joining us now is former acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf. Chad, thank you for coming to the program here. You hear from the congressman there. Someone with Al-Qaeda ties, 52, that is alleged here have ties to Al-Qaeda. And this is screening through Panama in this location. I'm just curious to know, in your thoughts and your experience, do we have enough screening guidelines if and when this caravan gets to the States to prevent terrorists from arriving to our border, from coming into our border?
Well, we certainly have the screening mechanisms. The question, though, is if you're overwhelmed, if Border Patrol is overwhelmed on that southern border, what gets missed? And we're not only concerned about the individuals that we apprehend. I would say from a national security perspective, I would be more concerned about the individuals we don't apprehend, the ones that Border Patrol never come into contact with. Those are the ones that are most concerning to me. And so when I hear the report about, Panama doing their job in apprehending individuals on the watch list, we provide a lot of assistance to Panama and others in Central America. And so I think that is working. But I think what it also shows you is that this is much more than just about minors and family members trying to come across that border for humanitarian reasons. There is a national security issue at stake on that southern border every single day. And every single day that the Biden administration doesn't get serious about upholding the rule of law and getting that border under control, I think more Americans are at risk.
Yeah, I mean, just in plain sight, it doesn't seem like a top priority at this point, and you would hate for something of significance to happen to make it a priority for this White House, kind of as you were alluding to. And I want to read this to you as well. The New York Post reporting this, that the Biden administration reportedly flying thousands of migrants from Texas in the middle of the night to the burbs of New York here, Westchester County, also Florida, Jacksonville, I believe. All this taking place since August the 8th. Of course, a big deal. But here's how the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki spun it. Listen to this.
I'm not sure that it's in the middle of the night, but let me tell you what's happening here. It is our
4:29 a.m.
Well,
very early in the morning.
Here we are talking about early flights, earlier than you might like to take a flight.
Early flights, 2:30 a.m. That's an early flight. Is that an acceptable response? And does that raise any flags to you that these are always done around 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. and not at any other time?
Well, no, it's certainly not a good response. And I think this is just continues the pattern of the White House not being honest with the American people. But at the end of the day, this is what catch and release looks like. This is exactly why the Trump administration, why we went away from it. We ended that policy because this is what occurs, releasing migrants, whether they're minors or adults, into American communities at all hours of the night and day for that matter. And so when we talk about minors being released, they go over to HHS custody, and then HHS finds a sponsor. Now, what this administration did earlier this year was roll back some of the vetting requirements for those sponsors. Why? Because they needed to get the children out of the facilities quicker because they had overwhelming number of children. And so it's a spiral, and it's a circle here that continues to feed itself, which is they continue to incentivize children to come across that border. They get them into their facilities and they get them out quicker. And so we're sending these children to sponsors that haven't been fully vetted the way that they should be, the way that they were done over the last 4 years. And I just hope nothing serious happens.
Absolutely. Of course, as these numbers grow larger, you would have obviously more chances for something to happen, right? Obviously, this continues to grow.
Following 5 long years on the road after he fled his home country of Haiti, Maximilien Origadi finds himself in Tijuana, Mexico. He began his odyssey in Chile, working to earn money where he could along the route to the US border.
Life is very difficult here in Tijuana. There are a lot of Haitians and other migrants all looking for a place to sleep, for paid work to do. If we find opportunities here, we won't go anywhere. But if things stay the same, we have to find a way to get across the US border.
Indeed, recent migratory events have put more strain on this border than ever.
After turning back from the border at Del Rio last month, where thousands of other Haitian refugees crossed into the US, many of the Haitian migrants have now made it here to Tijuana, where this makeshift camp has been established at the foot of the international bridge into California.
Following a difficult year for Haiti, which saw the assassination of a president and a damaging earthquake, Latin America as a whole is seeing a surge in Haitian refugees that began in earnest after the catastrophic earthquake of 2010. Migrant aid organizations are stretched to the limit. It's an issue Mexico's foreign minister highlighted at the recent UN General Assembly.
It is our obligation to defend people's human rights, regardless of their migratory status.
Still, Mexico continues to pursue migrants with military force, arresting and deporting refugees on their way north. For migrant rights activist and former Tijuana Migration Secretary José Luis Pérez, it's an issue that needs a more humanitarian approach.
The situation remains critical. People continue to arrive all along the length of our northern border, and they will keep coming as long as our governments fail to offer them legal status as recognized migrants. Because it's illegal human traffickers that see an increase in business when authorities tackle migration with arrests and deportations.
Haitian migrants in Tijuana now join the ranks of thousands more from across the world, waiting for a chance to get into America. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Tijuana, Mexico.
Brandon Judd, president of the National Border Patrol Council. Brandon, this is the worst possible scenario playing out. 52 people that were coming into the United States apprehended in Panama with ties to terrorism. But the big question, how many people weren't apprehended with those ties to terrorism?
Well, and that's the problem, is this is the worst case scenario because we just don't know the number of people that are getting away. And when you consider that many people have already been spotted in another country with ties to terrorism, and then you look at the number of people that are crossing our borders from countries like Russia, Romania, Armenia, Uzbekistan, Gambia, Senegal, these countries generally tend to have animosity towards the United States, and they're coming into the United States. But then you look at the number of gotaways and the people that have been able to cross our borders illegally and just have gone undetected or detected or were able to get away. 500,000 people when you consider the 42,000 that were able to get away in the month of September. So we just don't know what's coming across the border, and that is scary, and it needs to be a point of emphasis for this administration in order to protect the American public. But they just don't seem to have the will to do what is necessary necessary to secure our borders, to make it safe for the citizens of this country.
500 gotaways, you say. We know that there are hundreds of miles of stretches of border that aren't being patrolled because those Border Patrol agents are busy processing people. 52 people with ties to terrorism that were trying to enter the country. Would you call this a national security crisis?
It is, and it always has been when you look at what we deal with and what we face on a daily basis. And regardless of whether you consider it just people from countries of special interest or countries that want to do us harm, when you look at the drugs on top of that as well, this has always been a national security interest, and it needs to be something that is looked at very, very hard in order for us to get this under control. But it's not rocket science, and that's what's so frustrating and upsetting to those the men and women that put on a uniform and go out and patrol the border is we know that this has we've been able to get the border under control before, and we can do it again, and it doesn't take a whole lot as long as we have the policy in place to allow us to take those people in custody and remove them immediately.
Yeah.
If we don't do that, if we continue to reward people for crossing borders illegally, we're going to see numbers that are just astronomical that we just can't deal with.
Yeah, and Congressman Gonzalez, the soundbite that we played at the top, he said that when he spoke to the foreign minister in Panama, he asked her, does anybody in the Biden administration know that 100,000 people are coming or headed to the United States and 52 with ties to terrorism that were apprehended? And she said that she's trying to contact somebody in the Biden administration, but she can't get a hold of anybody. How is that an acceptable response from the administration?
It's not, especially when you consider that we had the single largest illegal immigration event just last month that played out in front of everybody on national television. It doesn't matter what media you looked at. It was there. And then when you consider that 234-mile stretch of border that Del Rio covers, we just didn't have anybody out there because they were all under that bridge trying to handle that chaotic situation. It's just what we see every day, and that's a fault to this administration.
Well, President Biden's pick to lead CBP, Chris Magnus, his confirmation hearing was yesterday, and we learned that in 2007 there was a lawsuit filed against him from several black police officers, and they claimed that he made some racist jokes and stopped them from getting promotions. A jury found him innocent, but what do you make of this situation?
Well, I think it's very curious that the far left, as long as you're a conservative, if you have any allegations against you whatsoever, the far left will condemn you, including the base that the Biden administration relies upon. Yet if it's somebody that's an activist, if it's somebody that believes in being activism, even if you have a uniform on, they'll forgive you. And that's what they've done in the case of Magnus, which again is so hypocritical of the far left. And when you deal with politics and you put that into law enforcement, it just doesn't belong. And again, it's something that we have to deal with, and we just can't get a handle on it right now.
You know, Brendan, Magnus was also asked about the images of Border Patrol agents, and they were falsely accused of whipping migrants, and he called those images troubling, but he says that the investigation needs to play out. Do you have an update on that investigation?
No, we don't, and it's gone way past what the administration said it was going to go past. But the reason is because there just isn't anything wrong. So they have to overturn every single stone to try to find something wrong. When President Biden said that those agents will pay, and that's a quote, the investigators are obviously going to have to come up with something. That's the reason why it's taken so long.
All right, Brandon, Judd, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really important topic. Great to have your take on it. Thanks.
Thank you.
5 undocumented immigrants are in custody after a joint effort by the El Centro sector and the Yuma Police Department, leading to a massive bust of weapons and contraband. Agents alerted to a Chevrolet Impala along Interstate 8 and followed it to a nearby trailer park. They tell us they came across multiple firearms strewn across the trailer and noticed several people crowded in the bathroom when agents arrived. Among the items seized were 2 semi-automatic rifles, 4 pistols, body armor, and even a cattle prod. And the El Centro sector agents also tell us that a truck disguised to look like a delivery vehicle was used to smuggle 8 immigrants near the Highway 111 immigration checkpoint. Agents stopped the truck, and the driver identified himself as a delivery man. After a search, agents found 8 undocumented immigrants, later found to be Mexican nationals, trying to hide themselves. The 37-year-old driver is facing federal charges. The truck was seized while the undocumented immigrants were taken into custody.
Why is the administration flying thousands of migrants from the border in the middle of the night?
Well, I'm not sure that it's in the middle of the night.
4:29 a.m.
In recent weeks, unaccompanied children passed through the Westchester airport to be unified with their parents.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki responding to the New York Post report exposing the secret flights bringing thousands of unaccompanied migrant kids from the southern border to suburban New York areas in the dead of the night.
Former Westchester County executive and New York gubernatorial candidate Rob Astorino and former ICE Buffalo Field Office Director Tom Feely join us now. Good morning to you both. Now, Rob, I want to start with you because the White House says that there are only children on these flights, but you witnessed these flights land firsthand, and what did you see?
Yeah, they're not going to gaslight me, and they're not going to gaslight America, because I know what I saw at the airport. There were some kids who were coming off with backpacks, but there were also adults. I mean, these are young men in their 20s and 30s who are not only coming off the plane, but I tweeted last night on my account a video from a Costco parking lot in Port Chester, New York, just near the airport. Lines of young men who were coming off those buses and just going into cars, and that was it. So they're not telling the truth. That's clear. I broke this back in August. I had a press conference on the 16th of August asking questions about who was coming, were they vaccinated, what are their backgrounds. I think it's a right for all of us to know, because this is a public health issue. It's a public safety issue. It is certainly the public's right to know. And, of course, what answer did we get? You're a racist, you're a xenophobe, blah, blah, blah. Okay, answer the question, of course, which they didn't. So if they're denying this, and now, of course, they can't, they're obviously not too sure of their policy.
Tom, you say Joe Biden is not using DNA to match these individuals with relatives. How do they know who to place these individuals with if they're not matching them with relatives? Are they just guessing?
Good morning, guys. Right, they are totally guessing and putting these children's lives in jeopardy. Under the prior administration, we used to do a DNA match to make sure and ensure that the kids were going to family members. That's not going on. The vetting of the people that are taking custody of these children that are not family, these support groups and whatnot, no background checks with them, no criminal history checks with them. It's just wide open. And basically, we're seeing human trafficking being done by our government in the middle of the night.
Yeah, Rob, I'm wondering how this works from a logistical standpoint. There were Westchester County police on scene when these flights landed, so it would appear that the county was given a heads up. If Westchester wanted to, could they have denied these flights from landing?
Probably not. However, there's a curfew at the county airport from midnight to 6 in the morning. County police normally work at the airport anyway, but clearly they did not alert the public to this, because they're not going to the terminal. They're landing, and these large planes, by the way, are probably in violation at the airport, certainly at the least with weight and height limits at the FBOs that they're going to on the other side of the airport where the public can't see. So the whole operation was literally meant to be under the cover of darkness, so the public didn't know anything about this. But look, we are either a nation of laws and borders or we're not. But we literally have our own government right now that is creating a sanctuary nation, because there certainly is no fear of recriminations. There certainly is no worries whatsoever among those coming into the country, because they know that their new government will take care of them, and they certainly are.
Tom, I quickly want to double back on something Rob said. Do we know that these passengers are not being tested for COVID?
They are not. There's just not that time to do it at the border. I mean, everybody knows once you take a test, it takes a couple days to get that back. So you probably have a mix of COVID positive people and non-COVID positive people that just haven't been tested yet.
Wow. All right, Rob Astorino, Tom Feely, thank you both so much for joining us this morning on this big news story. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
We are learning much more about flights that are bringing migrant children into the state of New York. We're told more than 2,000 kids have arrived in Westchester County since June, but there is a lot of concern about where they're going once they get here. News 4's Linda Beccaro live in White Plains with more on this. Linda.
Natalie, we just heard from Jen Psaki on this, White House press secretary. She specifically spoke about what's going on here in Westchester. Still, though, lots of questions and not too many answers about those flights coming into here, Westchester County Airport. Migrant children pouring into our area on flights chartered by the feds. Former Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino says that's what you're seeing on this video from a distance at Westchester County Airport. And he says the number of flights is increasing.
We have no answers about basic questions like who's coming here, where are they being settled or taken to, what is their vaccination status.
Two senior U.S. officials confirm the flights to the New York area have increased as the number of migrants, in many cases minors, coming into the southern border has greatly increased during the Biden administration.
It is our legal responsibility to safely care for unaccompanied children until they can be swiftly unified with a parent or a vetted sponsor.
Calls for more information about what happens to these children are coming from both sides of the aisle.
And we need information for the administration. Where are they sending these kids so the school districts can be prepared for the influx of the kids? And then we need to get the money.
Astorino, who's running for New York governor on the Republican ticket, first raised questions about the flights in August. Since then, he says he's received few answers.
This has everything to do with our own government not giving our own people information that affects their lives.
It's no surprise that kids can be seen traveling through states, not just New York. It's something that we're also working to unite children with their family members or vetted sponsors.
Now, a spokesperson for County Executive Latimer says that they addressed this issue thoroughly back in August. While Swazi says that the recent number is about 2,500, the spokesperson said that during the Trump administration, Health and Human Services housed nearly 1,000 migrant children in Westchester. The spokesperson added that they're told by the federal government that these children are either vaccinated or they are tested before arriving. But we also reached out to Customs and Border Patrol and Health and Human Services for more information about what happens and the process for these immigrants, and we haven't yet heard back. Reporting live in White Plains, I'm Linda Beccaro, News 4, New York.
Why is the administration flying thousands of migrants from the border in the middle of the night?
Here we are talking about early flights, earlier than you might like to take a flight. It's no surprise that kids can be seen traveling through states, not just New York. It's something that we're also working to unite children with their family members or vetted sponsors.
More snarkiness and arrogance from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on Fox News' Peter Doocy's question about these secret flights. The administration was caught again trying to quietly fly migrants across the country. You heard it here first that they are taking migrants from the Texas border and flying them to private airports, private jets. And by the way, let me just point out that those flights are being paid for by taxpayers. This is taxpayer money. Paying this money to fly migrants all over the country. And we know now from pictures that the New York Post published yesterday that one of those airports is in Westchester. Congressman John Katko is here. He is a ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. Is there anything you can do about this?
Well, unfortunately, Maria, this has been happening for quite a while now. Every time there's a surge at the border, this is what they do to disseminate folks throughout the country to release the pressure at the border. They're not, there's no vetting going on, and they're not working with the locals, that's for sure. And this is just one time when they, quote unquote, got caught doing it, but they're doing it all over the country. And you were down at Del Rio yourself. You saw firsthand that the border is a mess. And there's really no plan other than to disseminate people into the interior of the country. So basically every state's a border state now, and every city's a border city, because this is how they're relieving the pressure. They're letting all these illegals come in, and then they're throwing them on planes as quickly and quietly as possible to get them out of the area so it doesn't look so bad for the optics.
So, I mean, why do it in the middle of the night? Jen Psaki's over there saying, well, it's earlier than you would like to take a flight. It's 3 in the morning. And, it's the dead of night. And by the way, the airports, the private airports, have rules. You're not supposed to have landings after midnight. So clearly they're doing it so that people don't notice. Why? If this is what they want to do, why not just be honest about it?
Well, think about it, Maria. If they weren't concerned about the optics and they weren't concerned about the legality of what they were doing, they would just work with local officials and say, hey, we have a flight coming in at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and you guys can be there to greet them, and we can have a nice welcoming for them. No, they're doing the exact opposite. They're doing it as surreptitiously as possible. And that just kind of, I think, is emblematic of the fact that they don't have a plan and they know what they're doing is not right.
So President Biden's new pick to lead Customs and Border Protection, Chris Magnus, faced the Senate yesterday. He refused to use a certain word when describing the situation on the border. He won't say it. Watch this.
You believe we have a crisis at the southern border, yes or no?
Does it really matter whether we call it a major challenge, a crisis, a big problem? No one believes there is greater urgency to this matter than I do.
So, Congressman, your thoughts? I mean, he might say that the issue is urgent, but when asked about his plan to fix it, he did not have a solution. Your reaction?
Well, listen, he's towing the company line, and the company line is that we're going to have open borders, and we're going to deflect and conceal the fact that we have open borders. And that's exactly what he's doing. And his answer is completely ignored what all of his frontline employees, the 18,000 people who work for him, are saying. You talked to him down there, Maria. I've talked to him down there many times. I'm going again, and they all say it's all the same. We need more. We need to go back to the policies we had. These aren't working. Period. And he's just towing the company line, and it's disgraceful.
Right. It comes from Joe Biden. I've been to the border now 3 times, and it's gotten progressively worse every time I was there. But I guess, Congressman, what we want to understand is what can the Republicans do about it? For example, you and your colleagues were faced with the opportunity to vote for an infrastructure package, and we're going to have a potential vote on the infrastructure package sooner rather than later. And, you know, how does a Republican vote for an infrastructure package when there's not a penny in there for border control? There's not a penny in there for Homeland Security. There's not a penny in there for any infrastructure whatsoever about the wall in terms of, dealing with this problem. In fact, Joe Biden canceled all contracts for the remaining border wall construction in the Del Rio area. What can you do about it? Is there anything that Republicans can actually show some strength on this issue rather than just talking about it?
Well, listen, we don't control the House, we don't control the Senate, and we don't control the presidency, and that's job one, is to change that dynamic. I have a bill that's already ready to go out of Homeland Security that will change the border protection completely back to what it was. Finish building the barriers that are so unbelievably effective, increase electronic surveillance all along the border, and beef up Border Patrol agents significantly. You know, those 3 things, and going back to the policies we had, are what's going to make this the only thing that's going to make this thing change. And we can't force that change until we get control of the House again. So next year's election is very, very important. And I think we're going to take over the House, and I think we have a decent shot at taking over the Senate, and then we can get back to these policies and force real change. And I think that's what we're working on. And until then, we got to keep exposing this for what it is. It's a lie to say it's not a crisis, and it's completely ignoring what's happening to our country, what's happening at the border. Drugs are pouring across our border and killing our kids all over the country, and that's just a fact, and we've got to fix it.
Yeah, Congressman, thanks very much. We will keep following it all. Thanks for joining me today, Congressman John Katko, joining us in Washington.
The News4JAX I-team is digging into claims that the federal government is flying illegal immigrants into Jacksonville in the dark of night as the Biden administration tries to handle the flood of people crossing into the U.S. along the southern border. Taking a live look at the airport, Congressman John Rutherford tells us he believes around 7,000 undocumented migrants have come through here over the past few months. Now, I-team investigator Vic Michelucci is putting these claims through the Trust Index.
We heard from many of you rumors of illegal immigrants coming into Jacksonville overnight, thousands of them. We have been investigating, and now the Biden administration confirms that is happening here as they deal with the crisis at the border. Illegal immigrants from South and Central America continue to surge across the U.S.-Mexico border. And these photos show a chartered 737 coming from Texas, landing late Saturday night in Jacksonville. Airport police there to help escort the migrants off the plane and onto a bus. Local photographer David Rosenblum shot these images, some of his pictures in an article in the New York Post, which details the U.S. government moving migrants from the southern border to shelters across the U.S. Many appear to be children.
We haven't received any answers. The administration, the Biden administration, is keeping Congress in the dark on this. I think they know that Americans would be outraged
Republican Congressman Michael Waltz is upset, saying this is not the way to deal with the border crisis. With such a widespread issue like this, how do you even start to solve a problem like this?
Well, I think you have to reverse some of the policies that this administration has put in place, or some that they eliminated just because they were done by the Trump administration. They worked.
Saturday's flight was on Avelo Airlines, which doesn't typically fly into JAX. This one came in from Houston, then headed to Westchester County, New York. But a history shows the airline has been flying in and out of Jacksonville International since at least August 13th. Flights coming from places like Burbank and Ontario, California, as well as Houston, El Paso, Austin, and McAllen, Texas. The I-Team discovered records showing a total of 21 Avelo flights have landed here in the past 3 months.
Why is the administration flying thousands of migrants from the border to Florida and New York in the middle of the night?
Well, I'm not sure that it's in the middle of the night, but let me tell you what's happening here.
During Tuesday's briefing, the White House press secretary confirmed the Biden administration is flying migrant children across the country.
Here we are talking about early flights, earlier than you might like to take a flight. It is our legal responsibility to safely care for unaccompanied children until they can be swiftly unified with a parent or a vetted sponsor.
She says the Office of Refugee Resettlement coordinates travel for children in American custody. But Republican Congressman John Rutherford believes it's been done under a veil of secrecy.
We saw all of those people in Del Rio living under the bridge, thousands of them. Well, guess what? They didn't just disappear from Del Rio. They're now in our communities out here, all over the interior of the country.
Rutherford tells us he plans to draft a bill that would require the government to disclose details about the migrants and where they're heading. JAX officials had no comment, pointing out it's a public use airport, and this is a federal operation. So while we don't have the numbers about how many or the exact details here, we have confirmed that the claims that illegal aliens are being brought into and through Jacksonville during the night are true. We'll keep working to get you more information. Vic Michelucci, Channel 4, the local station.
Vic, thank you. Senator Marco Rubio sent us this statement saying, quote, "Instead of securing our borders and protecting Americans, President Biden continues to bring illegal migrants into the United States, many of which do not have documentation and could pose threats. The Biden policies," the senator says, "strain local communities and make it even harder to enforce common sense laws in the future."
Now to that top story, plane loads of underage migrants are being sent to a suburban New York City airport, according to the New York Post. The mostly nighttime flights from Texas to Westchester County Airport have reportedly been going on since at least August now. We've reached out to the Biden administration for 4 months to have someone join us on this show, but they have declined. Let's bring in former Westchester County executive and Republican candidate for New York Governor Rob Astorino. Thanks so much for joining us. To that point, though, sometimes the only time we get any sort of clarity on these issues is by turning to the White House briefing we did today. Jen Psaki was asked by our own Peter Doocy about these brand new images of those migrants getting off a plane at Westchester County Airport, and she explained it like this. I'll get your reaction.
Why is the administration flying thousands of migrants from the border to Florida and New York in the middle of the night?
Well, I'm not sure that it's in the middle of the night, but let me tell you what's happening here. It is our
4:29 a.m.
Well,
very early in the morning.
Here we are talking about early flights, earlier than you might like to take a flight. It is our legal responsibility to safely care for unaccompanied children until they can be swiftly unified with a parent or a vetted sponsor. So in recent weeks, unaccompanied children passed through the Westchester Airport, which I think is what you're referring to. It's no surprise that kids can be seen traveling through states, not just New York.
So cover of darkness, dead of night, or the early morning, it seems like the White House prefers. Why does it seem that they are doing this with such secrecy if this is something they are owning and the president is touting as his own policy?
Oh, good question, Sandra. And, you know, I blew the whistle on this August 13th. August 16th, I had a press conference at the county airport and showed video from my own Twitter account of people getting off these large planes, which, by the way, are not allowed to land those size planes or go to those FBOs, those hangars at the county airport. It's against the violation of their lease, that kind of size. And yet they're permitted. That was one of the very few daytime flights. Most of them are late at night or overnight, and at midnight the airport is closed. Flights are not allowed to come in. So the White House is completely obfuscating. That's a nice word for saying they're really lying, because I ask these questions, and it's not just children. I've seen it with my own eyes on my video. We just posted on my Twitter video from them dropping off adults at a Costco parking lot in Port Chester, New York, in Westchester County, not far from the airport. So, yes, there are some unaccompanied children that are being placed in and around our area in Westchester. When we were told they were not, they were going to Boston and Hartford and Baltimore and Chicago. But we know that that's not true. So if this is a policy that they stand behind, why would they do it under the cover of darkness and then not say anything to the public? Because, quite frankly, you know, we're under COVID restrictions. Our own civil liberties are being eroded right now. People are getting fired for not getting vaccinated, and yet you have unaccompanied children and adults coming into our communities, and we don't know who is coming in or where they're being placed. So I think the public has a right to know. This is a public health issue, a public safety issue, and they're not saying a word about it.
And I know we do have some of that video and of those migrants that are arriving in suburban New York. This dates back to August. And to your point about you holding that August 16th news conference, Rob, Miranda Devine from the New York Post just sent this out. She said the sad thing is that Rob Astorino held a press conference at White Plains Airport on August 16th to blow the whistle on the Biden administration's clandestine migrant flights, and he was ignored. You were called a racist for even holding that news conference.
Well, that's what they do when they know they're wrong and they don't want to answer the question, is they scream racist or xenophobia, hater, you know, all that nonsense. Look, it's not racist to ask these questions because, again, this is affecting our neighborhoods, our school, public health, all of these issues we have a right to know. And look, I don't blame these kids or even these adults to try to get into this country. Where they're coming from is desperate, including from Haiti and other places. But this is our own government ignoring our own laws, our border, our health crisis that we have in this country, and not answering what Jen Psaki said is so condescending and not answering the question, because Peter Doocy was correct on the times that those flights were coming in. So they've got a lot to answer for. They're taking their southern border crisis, which is self-inflicted, and they're now spreading it to the interior of our country and all of our communities. They took it from a Texas, Arizona, New Mexico problem, if you will, and now are making sure it goes everywhere else in the United States. We either have a country and a border and laws, or we don't.
And to your point about these are reasonable questions for Americans to be asking, especially members of those communities in which those migrants are arriving. How are they being vetted? What is the demographic of those migrants? Right. And to your point, Westchester County is still under very restrictive COVID policies. Are those migrants being tested? Are they vaccinated? We just don't have that information. We'll continue to dig to get it. Rob, appreciate you joining us.
No problem. And Miranda Devine and the Post did a great job on this one.
Yeah. Rob Astorino, we will follow up with you. Appreciate you joining us.
I'm pretty close to La Jolla now, and what I can tell you is that officials are going to take us to the border after that. And I really don't know what to expect, but what we know is that the situation is extremely active. There's been a lot of arrests this week. A lot of migrants have been found. Even 2 alleged mercenaries of a cartel have been arrested.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. Dozens upon dozens of people crossing, and they're considered family units because it's mother, children, fathers. They come into a designated area known as they call it the ballpark. There they get all their belongings. They put all their belongings together in separate bags. And then from there, they get sent to the Border Patrol station for processing. And then I'm not too sure what happens after that.
Sometimes they get released into the country, do you know?
Probably, they more than likely probably will get released. They just come in and turn themselves in.
No, they want to get caught.
Yes. These family units won't give us any problems.
Right.
So as far as like backup, they'll just sit down and just wait to get B-Next processed.
Una pregunta, ¿de dónde vienen? De Honduras. ¿Cuánto tiempo lleva viajando?
Casi más de 30 días.
Más de 30 días.
Arriesgándonos, carreteras, jalones, gente, robo, lo que sea. 14 años acá, me mandan de Estados Unidos, mi media vida aquí, voy a Honduras a esperar un perdón. Como manejé sin licencia, me dan me aprueban la residencia y luego llego al hotel y me dicen, no, vengo acá, si me dan asilo, o dejan pelear mi caso, o vean lo que hacen. Pero yo necesito una respuesta, y para ellos también, no importa.
The runners, do they all get caught?
I would say probably about 80% of the runners get caught. The rest are considered gotaways, which means they're able to get into the United States.
And you see gang members a lot?
Yes, we do.
Like daily?
Yeah, that is daily. We're so spread out thin that we're trying to help people out over here, but then you got people crossing a couple miles down, and then as soon as you apprehend over here, you have to head over there and then come back. It's a never-ending situation over here.
Wow. We just finished the tour in La Joya, Texas, and this is just another night for the troopers here. And right now I'm here in McAllen, Texas. It was a really busy night for the troopers, but they tell me that that's just the regular day, the regular night. Every night they see migrants crossing, they seize drugs, they also see cartel members and gang members, and they also go and look for migrants that possibly are runaways. Back to you.
Leo, did they talk about the difference, this year versus last year? Because we've seen their support, the federal government's immigration enforcement cut back so drastically under this administration. Did that Texas trooper tell you about the differences that he's seeing?
So he didn't want to get into politics, but he did say that they're stretched thin and that they do need a lot more resources. Many times, as he mentioned in the story, he is in a location and then a group of migrants try to get in from another location and they have to run to that area. But sometimes they can't even do that because they don't have enough resources, especially sometimes during the night. And because the Texas border is so large, they really need more resources.
Yeah, I know these guys' hands are tied sometimes on what they can say specifically. They don't want to get in trouble, but it does seem like there is an obvious difference between this year and last, even if they can't specifically say it.
Let's bring in Arizona Republican Attorney General Mark Brnovich. Attorney General, great to see you as always. It's always a pleasure to see you. One of the most entertaining AGs in the nation, I should say. We'll get into that a little
busiest
later. Busiest too, I know. What about this issue of smugglers, or at least the people that use smugglers? And I'm sure the smugglers are looking in there, too, to see how they can get more clientele, because they are making I think it was actually $400 million a month. One of the border experts told us yesterday, with just the human smuggling. They're making now more from human smuggling than they are from drugs. Isn't what Facebook is doing kind of aiding and abetting those cartel members?
Absolutely, David, and thank you for having me on. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. And we see in Arizona the surge of hard drugs, things like fentanyl coming across our border. I know as a former gang prosecutor that the cartels are enriching themselves. They are making money off people and drugs coming across that border. And so it breaks my heart when Joe Biden is out there talking about the jobs he's created, and I can't help but think he's creating the jobs for the wrong people. He's creating jobs for the cartel because they are now moving more drugs across the border than CVS and Walgreens combined. And Facebook, shame on these tech companies. I've had my battles with them. I've sued them, and they literally, when we wrote them a letter, they responded back saying that they literally are allowing for the facilitation of ads to allow people to illegally cross the border. That's what they said. So they literally know that they're breaking the law. As you know, the federal government is responsible for our border. There's only so much me and my colleagues can do. So the federal government,
the Border Patrol agents who would suggest that that's not happening.
Oh, it's absolutely shameful. The Biden administration has essentially decriminalized and incentivized illegal border crossings. As you know, we have multiple lawsuits against the Biden administration, everything on trying to make sure that they deport people with deportation orders, to trying to block them when they rescinded the public charge rule, which gives benefits to people that are here illegally. I mean, literally, David, the most pressing question facing people that have entered the country illegally now is not whether they have COVID. They're not being asked that. They're not whether they've been vaccinated. You know, not even whether they want asylum. Now the most pressing question is, do they want the king suite or do they want the resort fee? You know, I mean, it's literally, it's crushing what's happening to American taxpayers in our communities.
Well, we haven't talked about how it's affecting not only the people on the border, but you saw these secret drop-offs of illegal immigrants that come in, are flown in the middle of the night to places like New York, like Westchester, New York, right outside of New York City, offloaded, and God knows where they go from there. But you're actually asking for help from an attorney general of the United States who is part of this administration involved in this, I wouldn't say accomplices of the human smugglers, but people who are at least making their job easier.
Yeah, it's shocking to me as someone that believes very strongly in the rule of law that you have an attorney general that's willing to call parents that protest the vaccine mandates or critical race theory at school board meetings. He wants to investigate them, but the Biden administration is giving a free pass to the cartels and their enablers at companies like Facebook. So it's absolutely disgraceful.
Forgive me for interrupting, but what do you expect to get from A.G. Garland, who we see on the left side of the screen here, if in fact he's not doing anything to close the borders right now and not doing much to stop this sort of nonsense going on in Facebook?
Well, as you know, we have multiple lawsuits going on, and we are pleading with them to do the right thing and to shut down Facebook's ability to do these ads. As you know, Facebook has had the ability to throttle things going up to the 2020 election. They've censored stuff relating to different critiques or criticism regarding vaccines, but somehow they don't have the ability or the desire to shut down facilitating illegal border crossing. You know, you mentioned places like New York. Just last week here in Arizona, there was a seizure of 50 pounds of fentanyl in one stop. 2 milligrams can be a lethal dose. So that's like enough fentanyl to kill the entire population of New York City. So this may be in Arizona's backyard, but it's coming to everyone's neighborhood very, very quickly. Shame on the Biden administration. Let's get him to do something. Let's keep ringing the bell and forcing Merrick Garland and Joe Biden to protect Americans.
Okay, Attorney General, we're going to lighten things up a little bit. And as I mentioned before, you kind of have an unusual approach in many cases to being Attorney General. We want to show one of those on you. You expressed an ability that very few AGs have, and this is a videotape of that ability. Now, you look like a mild-mannered AG until you reach into your back pocket and pull out nunchucks. Look at this. What's going on here? What is this? Have you ever, by the way, have you ever had to use those things in a dangerous emergency?
Officially or unofficially, David? I will tell you, I am a man of many skills.
Unofficially, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, look, I have many skills, and I understand we are involved in every major lawsuit in this country right now at the state and federal level, but it doesn't mean that we can't have a little fun, and we have to keep things in perspective. And I am more than willing to take on Merrick Garland in the Kumite, in the squared octagon. Let's get Dana White or somebody to set up that match, right?
Okay, all right. By the way, is this a selling point in running for a higher office?
Oh, my gosh, politics sucks. You know that. And, you know, I had never run for anything before I was AG. I'm not going to change who I am. I'm going to keep doing my thing, do the right thing in the right way, and it's all going to work out.
By the way, that sounds
good.
like a bumper sticker. Brnovich says politics suck. I mean, that's a pretty good bumper sticker there.
It does.
I think you got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we've got breaking news. The New York Times is now reporting that President Trump, in the spring of 2020, was talked out of deploying 250,000 troops to the U.S. border to seal the border with Mexico, that the defense secretary quashed that proposal, and that also he basically wanted to go after drug cartels inside Mexico with military raids. Joining us now, Arizona Sheriff Mark Lamb. What is your reaction to that breaking news?
Well, I wish we would have done it. You know, I think President Trump was on the right track when he wanted to do that. We should label these folks as terrorists. They bring terror into our neighborhoods, whether it's through the trafficking of humans or illegal drugs. And that would allow us to be able to attack these people and deal with them accordingly. They are running roughshod over us and our communities right now, and we need to meet that force with force.
All right, but that's a lot, 250,000 U.S. troops, right?
That's a lot.
Yeah, we hear you. We also have this. Fox News' William Lajeunesse got video from private surveillance cameras in the Arizona desert showing hundreds of illegal migrants crossing into the interior. Sir Sheriff, you and I have talked about the estimated 400,000 gotaways who have evaded capture at the border. That's a problem, too.
Absolutely. And like in my county, we have them coming through every day. We do the best we can to stop what we can. But I don't have the camera systems that some of the other counties have to even monitor what's coming through my county. And mine are mostly military-age men. So this is something that's happening every day, and it has been. And it's only escalated since this Biden administration took over. It's not something that's just started. It's only getting media attention even more now that the migrants have left Texas.
We also have this. We've got Senate Democrats unveiling in their spending bills a push to cut ICE and cut funding for the border wall. And also Biden's border nominee, Chris Magnus, refused to say in testimony the border is a crisis. He said, does it really matter if you call it a crisis? What do you say to that?
Well, they've been playing a semantics game all along. They do not want to call it a crisis, but everything that is happening, the American people finally, I think, see through this and recognize it for the crisis that it is. It infuriates me, and I think that should show that maybe he is not the nominee that we should have there. I know that we stand against him in Arizona. The National Sheriff's Association does, Border Patrol, ICE. Hopefully the American people will put some stock into that.
How come you guys don't like him? Why?
Well, he's been consistently not worked with him. He's a nice guy. I've met him. I've worked, alongside. My county's not far from where his city is. And he just hasn't worked hand in hand with Border Patrol. Border Patrol agents are not fond of him. And I think that says a lot. This is the guy we're picking to be their boss. They should have a major say-so in it.
Yeah, but what is it? What exactly has he said or not said about the border?
Well, for example, when I took over as a sheriff, they called me, Border Patrol called me and says, hey, we have a plane that Tucson PD never uses. It's a plane that belongs to the Border Patrol for assisting them. We actually got the plane. They also gave up on the Stone Garden funds, which is money that the federal government allocates for local law enforcement, sheriff's offices like mine, to work hand in hand with the federal government.
All right. Well, we've got all of that. And we've got, Trump, it's quite a difference. I mean, 250,000 troops to seal the border. That's quite a thing that the New York Times is reporting there. Thank you, Sheriff Mark Lamb. It's good to have you on. We'll have you back on again soon. Thank you for your service to our country.
Yeah, really. So even Biden's border nominee, Chris Magnus, he agrees we need Trump's border wall. Joining us now is Montana Senator Steve Daines. Senator Daines, you must have put the fear of God into this guy, because it was a total capitulation. Because, look, I remember President Biden, in the beginning of this misbegotten term, said not another foot of the wall. Now, here's his own guy saying we need more wall. How'd you do this?
Well, hey, the bottom line, Larry, walls work. I spent a lot of time on the southern border. We've spent time shoulder to shoulder with our Border Patrol agents. And they'll tell you, to an agent, walls work. They reduce the number of illegals coming across between 60 and 90%. It's common sense. The challenge he's going to have, though, is I don't think if he starts speaking truth to power, that the lefties there in the administration, including President Biden himself, they're not going to listen to him. They're going to stay on this far left notion that walls don't work, and I don't think you'll see them build the wall. But I tell you what, it's nice to hear him say at least they work.
I mean, do you need an appropriation for this? Is this going to be part of this massive, misbegotten $5 trillion budget bill?
Well, no, the left, believe me, we're shut out from that negotiation. There's no way Bernie Sanders and Pelosi and Schumer are going to put anything about the wall in this massive, reckless, record spending and tax bill. But here's the bottom line. Look at the numbers just came out on September 30th, ending the fiscal year. A record number of apprehensions on the southern border, 1.7 million. Larry, that's an all-time record. And I'll tell you what, being from a northern border state like myself, it's a southern border crisis for us in Montana. I'll tell you why. Because of the flood of methamphetamines, fentanyl, and heroin that's coming across because of the Mexican cartels, and that those drugs coming right up in our communities in Montana, destroying families, more homicides, more felonies. So Montana is directly affected, as is much of the country, by what's going on, this lawless southern border that, frankly, is controlled by the Mexican cartels, thanks to President Biden.
Yeah, it's a national issue. It's not just a border issue. I know you're completely right. You think, I mean, I know they've had catch and release, a return to catch and release, which was stupid, and they stopped the remain in Mexico policy, which is equally stupid. But, I mean, if you had a wall, Senator, at least maybe we wouldn't have 2 million illegals coming across the border. I mean, maybe you could have cut it in half. Maybe we could have done something, because right now they don't want to do anything. The Bidens don't want to do anything, even acknowledge that it's a problem.
Larry, this is a very solvable problem, and we saw this under the leadership of President Trump. You build a wall, you put the Remain in Mexico policy back in place, you end catch and release. You know what? Things will quiet down that southern border. It's not that complicated, but sadly, the far left has got control of the White House, has got control of the Senate and the United States House, and we're ending up with this terrible mess that really started with the stroke of the pen on the first day that Biden was inaugurated in January.
You think we can ever stop this dead of night airplane landings and airports? We got one here, Westchester County Airport outside of New York. I mean, people are offended. I don't have enough time to go through with it. I'm just saying, since you succeeded on the wall, maybe you can stop this too. Senator Steve Daines, we appreciate it very much. Talk soon.
Thanks, Larry.
But, John, we begin with the crisis at our southern border. Senior correspondent Mike Tobin is reporting live from La Jolla in Texas. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Sandra. A DHS source confirms that the fiscal year for 2021 saw 1.7 million border apprehensions, and that breaks a record which stood since 1986. One thing we could see very plainly yesterday is that the flow of migrants to the southern border is not slowing down at all. The first groups of migrants showed up just before sundown. They found a gap where construction on the border wall had stopped. They were from Nicaragua and Honduras, single adults and families. The babies they carried were covered with bug bites. A father with a 10-month-old told the story of walking and hitching rides for 20 days. They didn't know if they would make it. They didn't know if they could stay, but they're hopeful for a better life.
So in Mexico City, they boarded a trailer that had no ventilation. People were passing out. They couldn't breathe. They were in it for 2 hours, and that was what got them worried about their daughter's safety. We've all suffered hunger, thirst, threats, danger. We've all suffered sleeping in warehouses just to make it to this country where everyone is free.
A source with Border Patrol told us the families will be able to stay. The unaccompanied minors will be able to stay. The single adults made the trip in vain. They will be subject to Title 42, which sends them back, citing a health crisis. But all these stats only total up the people who made contact with the authorities. They do not total up the runners or the gotaways, the people who sneak through the lines and pass into the country undetected. Their numbers are estimated in the hundreds of thousands.